Welcome to the ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to feature my recent conversation with Janeth Gomez. Janeth is a 2017 graduate from our Global Executive MBA format, and she and I recently connected via Zoom to talk more about her background, how she decided to pursue an MBA, what led her to Darden, the value of doing a Global Executive MBA format, and much more. So without further ado, here is my interview with Janeth Gomez. Janeth, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Brett. This is very exciting.
Well, it's great to have you here. Before we get into the meat of our conversation, just want to check in and see how you're doing during this time. How are you and your family?
We're doing well. Well, my family is in Colombia, and the restrictions there have been a lot more strict than here. So my dad, who is, over 80, he is not able to leave the house. And, he's very happy with that. He's a homebody. So I don't think he's bothered by it. My mom obviously she only goes out in the necessary. Like me, I'm also trying to stay home and do my part, to help with this is like a collective help. We have to help each other through this, and working from home like anybody else. And I actually like it. I like the work from home. I miss the people. I miss spending time with people, but there is something very nice about, if one day I have to work late, I know I'm just home. I don't have to drive and all of that. So.
Have you picked up any new hobbies or interests over the past few months?
I'm learning Italian, so that has been kind of my biggest thing. Also, so I split my time between Richmond and Northern Virginia. I have a very good friend who lives in Richmond in my house, actually. So we've actually been spending time in each other's places is a way to sort of come back to the proverbial cabin fever. So I think that time, the commute time has also been adding, but yeah, also got very big into kayaking. Those are my two things. How about you?
You know what, just every day, just getting through here. I'm a big reader, so have been spending a lot of time reading. I also enjoy playing guitar and listening to music. So I've also been going on really long walks. So, get out there. It's been beautiful here in the DC area this past weekend in particular. It feels like fall, which is a little bit hard to believe since we're recording this in mid-September, but nevertheless, still able to find some things to do. But you're right, unusual times. So just trying to make the best of it. So, Janeth, it's great to have you here. Thought it would be fun to have you on the podcast to talk about your story, how you decided to come to Darden, ultimately, what's been the impact of the experience, and so much more. So for our listeners, we typically start off with the same first question. Who are you? What's your background, and what's your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm born and raised in Colombia. My undergrad was in, it's technically the translation is systems engineering, but it's really more of a combination of computer engineer and computer science. So if you could merge both of those, make an engineer. And so very technical, but in a way had a minor in business. So I always learned about coding and software with a business perspective, which I think is what brought me to the path where I am. After finishing my undergrad, I was very technical, very devoted. I was working in artificial intelligence, and I'm totally gonna give up my age here, but that was in like the early 2000s when, yes, there was a lot of research on that, but it wasn't as mainstream as it is right now. So I got an assistantship to get my master's in computer engineering, Master of Science at the University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez. So came to Puerto Rico, got my master's, had a couple of offers to go and get a PhD, and also are, very much focused on intelligent agents and artificial intelligence. But there was something that told me that different than my brother, who had very similar background, like he loves programming, right? Like he loves software. Like I love that, but for business, for the application, the sake of what I can achieve. So I decided that I was going to deviate from my path, and I was not going to go to neither a big computer, like a big tech company, which we already had some of those, Microsoft, Google, or getting a PhD, but I was actually gonna come and work for Capital One, which I still work for Capital One. So Capital One recruited me from the University of Puerto Rico, and I moved to Richmond. I always joke that I moved here with 2 bags, and and it was like a very interesting experience. And I stayed there, so eventually made it to Darden. Through that kind of transition from like a very technical, data heavy, little by little started learning about what I could do in the world of business. And for me, that transition required something else. So that led me to Darden, and I'm sure we're going to talk more about that. And my current role is I am in our card Main Street team. So it's the team that focuses most of the households in America who are considered Main Street. And I'm working in the product team, and we're currently focused on building some new underwriting capabilities that allow us to help customers in a situation like the one that we have right now, where many households are experiencing disruption of incomes, and we have a series of regulations when we have to make sure people can pay, and we are not giving them something that gets them in trouble. So we are building a series of capabilities that can address that. And I have a lot of other things. This is very much a general manager role, which is exactly the type of stuff that I love to do.
It feels like a time, at least in our financial history, when access to credit cards are really, really important. I think of everything now seemingly is an electronic transaction, this kind of digital payment,
Yep.
credit card payment.
Yep, exactly. I mean, that we have been moving more and more towards that way of doing it. And I'm working in the acquisitions part. So this is where the customer joins, and how can we determine who we give credit to, how much credit we give them. But yeah, everything is online, and the more friction we have, the lower the probability that a customer is gonna go through the process, and they're gonna have the time or the means to do it. So it's very important for me and my team to make sure that we decrease that friction. So going back to that electronic portion of everything.
So is an MBA something that you had thought about for a while? You mentioned being interested in business and kind of not staying totally in the sort of technology realm. Had you thought about an MBA for a while?
The interesting thing is I didn't. At the very beginning, it was like I had this thing about the application, right? Like in my undergrad, I had to do a thesis, and I wanted to work in artificial intelligence and mobile agents, which, I thought were super cool at the time. And that was the time of the Matrix, with the agents who went from one area to the other. So I always imagined that I was that person building those systems. And I thought it was just cool. But I had the option to apply to different areas, and we decided to apply to build a system for like small business owners who didn't really have the technology. And it was all applies to electronic commerce. And that was interesting to me. So I was focused on the application. It was accomplishing something for the sake of advancing the business and advancing the country and the economy. But it wasn't about being in the business. And I think throughout Capital One, I realized that, especially as I went up in my different levels in the organization, like at the very beginning, I could think about application and that was okay. But then eventually I needed to think about the impact of everything, right? Like I have to make decisions about trade-offs, right? Like, do I tell my team to build capability A or capability B, and what is the impact of each one of those? And without understanding the business, that makes no sense, right? Like there is a business impact. Like what is the bottom line? What is the top line that I'm impacting? And what are the resources? Eventually, like, we just talk about return on investment. So as we started having those conversations, I started thinking that there was a lot more there. And although I had enough business knowledge to understand what was going on. I wanted to like propel my career. And this opportunity came up. I was talking to my manager and we started talking about the MBA. And eventually he told me, like, are you actually serious? Like, do you really want to do an MBA? And I was like, oh my God, oh, like, this is a big commitment. Am I really going to do it? So I went home and I had a big of a soul searching, and I said, yes, I absolutely want to do it. Like, this is the path that I wanted to have and I wanted to continue. And yeah, that's what brought me there. And it took me a couple more years before. So it was like a 2-year plan of being ready and being in that path and getting all the approvals, because I did an executive format. So I needed to have all the approval and the support from Capital One. So it took me like 2 years to process all of that, but I think it was the right time.
I'm glad that you mentioned that 2-year time frame, because we share that with prospective students all the time, that for many students in this program, it's a 2 to 3 year process in terms of evaluating, is this the right time? Is this the right program?
Mm-hmm.
This whole thing, it's not something that typically happens in just a few months. And I think oftentimes people think, oh man, I'm taking too long. Other people may not necessarily take this much time, but your life is pretty complicated when you're thinking about a program like this. There's a lot of stakeholders to consider. So 2 years, 2 to 3 years is what we typically hear. What appealed to you about the Darden program?
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, at the very beginning, Darden was not in my list, right? Like I wanted to do a global program, that I knew for sure. Coming from Colombia, one of the things I've eventually want to do is to work for either a company that serves Latin America, or my ideal, my preferred option would be, if my company expands into other markets and I can, keep bringing this. I strongly believe in the values and the mission and the way that we work at Capital One. So that would be my ideal. Like, hey, we expand. Like, hey, raising my hand here. I have global knowledge. I can go and do it. And I wrote that in my quote unquote essay to Capital One when I was requesting approval. So I started looking for global programs, and I look at other universities, and I remember everybody kept telling me, like, I think you should look at Darden. And I'm like, but I don't think Darden has a developed or good global program, because that's what I hadn't actually heard about it. And then eventually somebody's like, you should actually go and check it out. And instead of having these sound bites, understand and see it for yourself. So I visited several universities. I attended classes, when you have prospective students that come and attend the class. So I did that with Darden. For many of these universities, I including Darden, I attended to 2 or 3 of the sessions. Like, I'm very thorough in my research as a, good analyst of analyst background. So I think from the beginning, once I attended the class, I was like, oh, wow. Like, this is it. So I still kept doing my due diligence. And what I realized was, one, the case method, that was the ideal way for me to learn, right? I love to be in a situation where, in a way, it's low risk, right? Like, I'm making a fake decision in a case without actually having the risk of losing a bunch of money that I have in real life at work, or messing something up. So I could take risk and really allow myself to form opinions. So even when I was in the classes, I would raise my hand and I would give my opinion. And when I was just watching, I would always come at the end and tell the professor, I think this is what I would do. So the case method was one big thing. And then as I started learning more about the faculty, I was so impressed about the background and the investment, and just like how well known and well recognized they were, and everything, and how they had moved forward the community and the business community, and push boundaries in a lot of different areas. So the last thing for me was like, okay, so how global is global? And then I started looking more into the cases, and there were some of the universities I was considering were even using cases from Darden, and the way that the residences were structured. So I look into everything, like the places, does this fit my objectives? And I realized that I had heard a lot of sound bites that were definitely not doing Darden enough justice. And I was like, there's no other way that I'm going to go to another university at this point, right? Like, I want to go to UVA, I want to go to Darden. And I was like, I never applied to any of the other programs. I wanted to do the global program, and that was it. Never looked back and never regretted my decision for a second. And now I tell everybody this story too.
Yeah, and our Global Executive MBA format now has, if you can believe this, 12, potentially 12 global residency locations. So
Oh, wow.
we've gone from, maybe 4 locations in these 2-week trips to now 1-week global residencies where we don't do class abroad anymore. They're now focused on just immersing in the location. A lot of that inspired by some student feedback about, hey, I love being here with the faculty, love learning about accounting and finance and all these kinds of things. But when am I going to be in Sao Paulo again? Or when am I going to be in Berlin again? And really want to get outside the classroom. So now all major continents are covered in the global residency offerings. We announced all of this for the class that started this August. So we're really excited about that. But, I think about just what that global experience adds to students' learning experience. For you, Janeth, getting outside of the US, seeing business around the world, what was the impact of that experience for you?
Wow, it's very hard to summarize that impact. I think that there are multiple perspectives of that. So the first one, I would just say, like, the bonding that we had with our classmates when we were together and we spent all these hours, because it wasn't just like a regular 9 to 5. Like, we spent time from like 7 a.m. to midnight, a lot more. and and we experienced, yeah, classes, we experienced life. So I think that there was a level of bonding that happened where I know that my classmates, like, I can be completely myself with them. I can ask them, I can share the question, life transitions, work transitions. So everybody talks about one of the big and important things of getting an MBA is the network. And I can say this is beyond a network. Like this, we became a family, and that is extremely important. We try to meet every year. Of course, we couldn't do it this year, but we will definitely do it next one as soon as all of this is over. So that was one of the big perspectives. I think from a global and business perspective, then I would say it's twofold. One is, there is something about understanding the culture and understanding the people. And yes, obviously, when we're talking about whole different countries and continents, of course, there is a cultural difference. But I think a lot of what we learn can be applied to just having people in our team, right? Each one of us is different. Each one of us is a different world. And we have things in common and we have things that are different. And I think it made me a much better leader, because I can value the differences and see the difference and understand them. And I think we always talk about accepting differences, and I tell my team, oh, don't even say thank you for accepting me. Like, that is not enough. For me, the differences and is fully embracing what people bring to the table. And I think seeing businesses in different countries opened our eyes to the value of embracing those differences and truly, like, using them in getting leverage to add to the value to the business. So that is one thing that was extremely enriching to me as a leader. And then the other part is obviously the actual business, right? Like, seeing the possibilities about what all of these amazing countries and amazing business companies, like businesses that we visited, like, all they have to offer, and how, and the possibilities as a business leader of what we can do. And to this day, we have conversations with big leadership when they say, hey, we want to do A, B, or C. And I say, oh, well, we should consider this company in, I don't know, Brazil, or this is something that's happening in Colombia. And this is how we can think about from the perspective of integrating and bringing those learnings, or maybe expanding or things like that. So I think it's just valuable from any perspective you can think, from personal to business to everything. If we don't grow going into those type of residences, then I don't know where we're going to grow.
Well, you and your classmates traveled to Brazil, Western Europe, so Paris and Berlin,
Yes.
China as well,
Mhm. Yep.
and India.
And
I know they were all incredible experiences. What stands out to you as perhaps your favorite global residency location?
ooh, wow, that's a very hard question. I don't know if I have a favorite. I think each one of them are very, very different. Um, I would actually say my favorite thing of all of the residences, or the common theme for me, is how connected I felt with each location that we visited, right? I had a lot of misconceptions about many of these places. Like I remember going to Brazil thinking, I got this. I'm Colombian with neighbors. I grew up watching Brazilian TV and Brazilian football, soccer, good American English. Um, and I was like, I'm done. And then I realized that we were actually more different than I thought. So, and the opposite happened in some of the other residencies. When I heard some of the things in India, and I was like, oh my God, we think that way. We do those things, and seeing the things that connected us and things that make us very the same and very different. So I don't know if I can pick one of the residences. We had such amazing experiences in each one of them. I I think that experience of me feeling the feelings that I needed to have in these places was probably my favorite thing of all of them. We also had some amazing things that we did in each one of them, like dancing samba in Brazil with like a dancing with the stars type of instructor. That's priceless, right? Like having a cocktail with the Great Wall of China with the class in a day when there's almost nobody there, or seeing the Taj Mahal in the morning with like in a foggy morning. Like those are things beyond the learning. Those are things that I will treasure for the rest of my life.
You're right that the program does make time for cultural experiences like
Mm-hmm.
those. And I had the good fortune to travel with our class of 2021 to Brazil last year. They were there for a week. And the thing that struck me about that particular trip is that everybody was away from their usual environment, right? So you're all there together. To your point about the bonds that form on these trips, kind of separate from your everyday life. You're staying in touch with people back home, but you're all there together. You're in a new environment, a new place. It's exciting. The students stayed really active. I was in chaperone mode, but ultimately the students did stuff, in the evenings when they had unstructured sort of downtime, went out and sort of sampled the local cuisine and nightlife and all this
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. And I have to believe that the group of people that traveled to Brazil in on that November trip feel super connected to one another because they all had that experience
Mm-hmm.
together. And it is certainly about the structured opportunities, but it's also about the sort of unstructured opportunities that happen over the course.
Yep.
Just the social outings and things.
Yep. For sure. And we can have a whole other podcast about some of the learnings and the things that we experienced. It was definitely an amazing time. Like there's a part of me that says, can I go back to school and just do this all over again, just so I can have those experiences again?
And to your earlier point about the value of the global experience, and we feel very strongly about it at the Darden School. As some of our listeners may know, both of our executive formats, our executive MBA as well as our global executive MBA format, have a required global experience. And really, the only difference between our EMBA format and our GEMBA format is just the amount of required global experience. At this point, EMBA format students are required to do 1 week-long global residency. GEMBA format students are required to do 4 week-long global residencies and up to 12 locations now. And, we've thought a lot about that global experience, recognizing the value of it and really trying to make it the most action-packed week we can for students. So it's great to hear about your experience, Janeth. One of the things that is always an adjustment for students doing a working professional program is how do you make all these things work together, right? So you've got a full life, you've got work, and you've got school. School's kind of the wild card because you probably knew how to manage work and life, and so now you're trying to fit Darden into the mix. What was the biggest adjustment for you as you got started in the program?
Whew. Um, I've always worked, and I've always had like life, school, and worked, right? I think there was for a while when I would between my master's and Darden, I only had life and work. So definitely was a readjustment. But I don't think it's something that I personally had never done before. Like I always worked full time and studied full time. And so I was used to the rhythm. Of course, I was much older. When I was in my early 20s, it was much easier to do all of that. At the very beginning, so one advice I give everybody that goes through the program is there is like a I don't remember if it was pre-matriculation or what was the name of, like, there were some classes we had to take at the beginning. And I did those very vigilantly. But is that a word? There's from time to time some words that get there. Like I was very, very deliberate about making or taking those sessions, and I study. I think that helped me when I went to the regular classes to have refreshed my knowledge of, I don't know, accounting and statistics and some of the things that I didn't use on a daily basis. So that, I think, it helped me. Some of the folks that I saw that had probably not taken those or still taking those, and then they had an adjustment during class. So I think by doing those earlier, I had the flexibility. The other thing is I think I've learned to balance life, right? I was very, like, I had my schedule, and my friends knew that that was like my Darden time, and I became really good at prioritizing. It's very hard to say no when you just don't have anything else. And sometimes we just put ourselves last. So when I was doing this at Darden, I knew what was important for me, and what wasn't, it wasn't. And I had a very good reason to say no to different things. So nobody questioned it. I was like, hey, I have an exam, I have to study. So nobody questioned it. My friends were on board, and I knew those that were sometimes were pushing and everything. I was like, well, maybe you're not valuing enough what I have. There's a funny story so we all get like a person from the previous class who gives us advice. And for me, it was Mayra, who's now a friend, and I totally love her. And she was like, look, this is a piece of advice, right? Don't go through huge life changes, right? Like, don't have babies, get married, move, remodel your house, like, if you can avoid it, because it's very hard. Of course, if I go through my class, we all did those things, potentially more than once. Like, I moved from Virginia to Texas in between, my the middle of the MBA. I actually came back from the China residency on Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday moved to Texas. So, and then did a back and forth kind of thing. So all of that happens. I think the hardest semester is the first one, the hardest term is the first one. Because you're going through the adjustments. But once you do that, it's much easier. So my advice to everybody is, don't be afraid. It will happen. You will find a balance, right? Use your schedule. We had classmates who had like a scheduled time to exercise, a scheduled time for this. So I've always did that. I did a lot of work ahead of time to make sure that when I got to the residencies, I could actually enjoy time with my friends. So that was also important for me. So I don't know, I think it just happens, but like everything in life, like people who have kids, I always say, how do you do it? But like, it just happens. You just got to do it. So it happens. You find the balance that works for you. And this is not one size fits all.
It's very true. And everyone has different commitments on their time. I think, as I always remind incoming students, you can look around your class and there will be classmates that have fewer commitments than you do. Mm-hmm. They have more free time. And there will certainly be other classmates who have a lot more on their plate than you do. And so the thing that I think is important is to stay patient, accept the fact that in that first semester in particular, mm-hmm. things might be a bit messier, right? As you get adjusted to balancing all of this and figuring out what it means to be a Darden student. Learning in the case method is a change for most of our students. So how do you get ready for class? Is your approach mm-hmm. good? Were you ready to contribute? Were there things that you missed? It's all part of a skill development. And you typically, it takes about 4 to 6 months or so for people to feel rooted in the program and
Yeah.
like they've got it figured out. And it's funny to hear Myra's advice to you about not having any life changes, because all I can think of over the past 5+ years that I've been working with executive MBA students is how many life changes they have had during the
Yes.
program. Most classes have like 20 new babies that are born to students in the class, and of course there's job changes and people move and
Hmm.
all kinds of things. Your life will not stay static during this program, but it's
Yep.
incredible to think about all that students now feel capable of doing because they have done this program, in addition to having very full lives. Sort of psychological impact of that is considerable. So Janeth,
Hmm.
you mentioned that you're very much in a general management role right now. How has your Darden experience helped you? What's been the impact of your time at Darden?
Yeah. I think there are two parts for that. One is at a personal level, I think it gave me the confidence to speak to people from a lot of different areas, right? Like coming from the background I have, and I have some quote unquote rotations in the kind of business side, and with the Capital One, we call the credit world. So I had a rotation, and I can speak the language in a way. But I think in Darden, I had this experience to see everything end to end, and the case method really allowed me to look at decisions that consider a lot of different perspectives. So when I go and talk to people from a lot of different areas, I have that confidence, I have that knowledge. I can adjust my language, my way of thinking to understand things from their perspective, so we can actually find the middle ground and the win-win. So that's very personal for me. On the other hand, I think it also gave me, well, the knowledge to have that confidence. I think that it's twofold, but there are two sides of the same coin. Is I have the knowledge as a leader to think from those perspectives, but also to get the best out of my people. I remember in our first residency, in every residency we had all of this like special things. In our first residency, we had an orchestra come to Darden, and they were showing how the conductor was such an important part of making the team feel one way, or the artist feel one way or feel the other, or the melody sounded very different. And that has stuck with me. And I think I strive to be, I say I am, but I've definitely strived to be, because it's a journey to be that orchestra conductor. And through the rest of the program, I kept thinking of things from that perspective. How do I make sure I let people be who they are and let people be great at what they are, right? Like the orchestra conductor may not know how to play the cello, but they need to know how to guide that cello player to be the best they can be within the symphony or whatever they're performing. And that's how I see work, and that's how I see my work as a general manager. I don't need to know all of different things. I don't need to know how to play the cello. I just need to be able to bring that person up, and that's what I do with my tech organization and my design organization, and my own team in product and business, etc. And I think that was extremely crucial for me to go through that transformation. It's a transformational experience. Everybody says it, and unless you have been through it, it's very hard to fully like feel it in your being.
It's very true, and no small plans here at the Darden School. Transformation is the goal of the program. You said something earlier about the case method that really resonated with me, and something that we share quite a bit with prospective students who are considering the program. The opportunity to be in class, to be in the position of senior leaders, C-suite leaders, making a decision, but in the environment where you have a safety net, right? It's an educational
Mm-hmm.
environment. These are not, quote unquote, real decisions. There's no consequence of the decision in class. However, it is a great opportunity for you to practice these skills. It sounds like that's something that resonates with you.
Yeah, it does completely. So my work, that is exactly what we do every day, right? Like our meetings where we make decisions are a big business class of the case method, but the case is real life. So that was something that was very important for me. And And my favorite part of the case method, beyond what you just mentioned, is you always need to have an opinion. And the answer is not black or white. Or it's not, one or zero. Coming from the computer world, a lot of times things are like one or zero. Or, I in my background, a lot of the things I have in my background are exact. So getting to Darden, I was looking for that like exact answer. What is the right answer? And there is no right answer. I mean, sometimes there is. If you're an accountant exam, sometimes there is a right answer. But the opinion is it depends. And that's what I have to do on a daily basis at work. Like, it depends. What are the things I'm considering? What are the risks I'm balancing? And you're right, the decisions are fake decisions at that point, since we're not really the CEOs or the board members of those companies. But if you were to judge by the discussions that we had in class and how passionate we got and how involved we were, you would think we're actually risking that many billions of dollars in some of these decisions. But my favorite part is really it teaches you to think beyond what we have in front of us and consider the second and third and fourth order implications and all of the things we don't see and form an opinion, which I have to do daily. And I think anybody in business needs to do daily, probably 10 times a day.
That's the thing that we hear so often from current students and alumni, is that it just feels very real. Like, this is actually how business works, right? A group of people in a room looking at the same problem, trying to get to the best possible decision. So, Janeth, it's been great talking with you. Always a pleasure catching up with you. And we've covered a lot of ground here on in this conversation. Curious about any final words of advice that you might have for our prospective students who are listening to this podcast. What might you suggest that they consider?
I would say attend a class or like a mock case class, because I don't know how we're doing those in the virtual world, but allow yourself to feel the experience and the class. I think that for those who are already in the business world, especially executives, and like, they would know immediately that that's how the real world like works outside. And for those who are maybe transitioning or come from like a more academic background, or whatever different backgrounds, it's like, just allow yourself to experience that, because once you make that transition that a lot of MBA students do, it's like, that's how things are going to look like. So feel it, enjoy it. Do your research, like look at the professors, look at everything that they're doing, look at the impact, look at where the cases that Darden produce are going. I think that once they go through that, that's going to be, like, the decision is going to be as clear as it was in my mind. Look at the support that the school provides after. Like, that had been something that's been super critical for me, having access to the, career counselors after graduating from Darden, and like having access to, conversations like this one. We get still to talk and see each other and engage with the school. That would be the other part. And then the third one is like, just go for it. I think that for people who are thinking about an MBA and they have this feeling that it's in their path, some people have it more clear, some others not. Like, do your research, understand how it fits in your career, but if it's transformational, and if what you're looking for is something that transforms your life and your career, like, do it. The balance will come. It will happen. Everybody in my class, we all had different circumstances, and trust me, there were people with like much more complex circumstances than mine in terms of work and family, and the ones who had kids and all of these things. And everybody went through it, and we help each other and we support each other. So just do it.
It's great advice. And the way to think about some of this is, by coming to a webinar, participating in a mock class, these are
Mm-hmm.
just sort of small bets, ways for you to kind of engage with, does this feel like the right step for
Mm-hmm.
you? You're right, doing class visits right now is more complicated given the
Yeah.
pandemic, but we do have a number of mock classes upcoming. And so that's a great way to come and meet a faculty member, connect with fellow prospective students, and some members of our executive MBA community. So those are all out there on our website. And sometimes it's one thing to hear the case method described. It's another thing to actually be a participant in
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm not surprised to hear that your class visit experience was the thing that kind of pushed you forward with Darden is a place that I want to be. That is a very common story, as you might imagine, Janeth.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. That's what I said, not just visit or be in the mock class, but like allow yourself to actually participate, right? Like prepare, engage, like feel the experience. And that's what did it for me. Like when I said, I'm gonna be here as if I was actually at Darden. And then when I was at Darden, I was there as I was actually in the boardroom. And if you allow yourself to go that way, I think the experience is going to be the best experience we can be. Right.
Well, Janeth, thank you for your time. Thank you for taking
Thank
time out of
you.
a Monday morning. So appreciative of your carving out some time for the podcast. As always, it's great catching up with you. And I hope you stay safe. And thank you again for your time this morning.
Thank you so much. You stay safe too. And it's always awesome. I always say yes to Darden.
And that was my interview with Janeth Gomez, a Global Executive MBA format graduate in our class of 2017. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.